Tonight, Manitoba Hydro manages damages after the first sexual assault charges come months after a decades-old report surfaces alleging violence against Indigenous women.
I think a huge part of allyship is examining your privileges and the space you take up. I think a huge part of allyship is examining your privileges and the space you take up.
And the Indigenous Ally Toolkit, a new resource for non-Indigenous people who want to help Indigenous nations.
Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation wants to block a major oil sands expansion project in Alberta. Syncrude's oil sands expansion would add an extra 14 years of operation on traditional land. The First Nation has filed a submission opposing the expansion, and this week the community's leaders are in Fort McMurray hearings on the project. Tamara Pimentel has this story.
Members of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation entered the hearings held by the Alberta Energy Regulator with one thing on their minds: protecting the land. The First Nation is voicing its opposition to Syncrude's Mildred Lake Extension project north of Fort McMurray. The extension would allow the mine to produce 738 million barrels of bitumen and create over 1,100 construction jobs. But it would also allow Syncrude to operate on traditional land for an extra 14 years.
This project here is just going to continue to add to more problems as we are having here today. It ain't going to get any better, it's going to get worse.
Chief Alan Adam of the ACFN says Syncrude has been operating in the region for 40 years and have already had a negative impact to the land. Declining water levels, elimination of caribou and moose habitats, and contamination to the waterways.
I remember as a kid when you could drink water from the Athabasca River, you could drink water from the Athabasca Lake, or you could eat fish. I remember those days. You know, I might have been a young kid at the time, but I still remember it. But now, today, you cannot do it.
Roy Ladouceur lives off the land in Poplar Point. He says low water levels have made it difficult for transportation on winter roads.
Leave well enough alone as it is for the time being. Give Mother Nature its own space and time. Mother Nature knows best how and goes about doing its own rehabilitation, reclamation. It's all in her hands.
If approved, the oil sand mine would be in operation as soon as 2023. The hearings will continue until February 8th. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Fort McMurray.
Charges have been laid months after a report alleged harassment, racism, and sexual violence against Indigenous women by some Manitoba Hydro workers and RCMP officers. A bombshell report outlined incidents at the kiosk generating station at the construction site. It resulted in opening 9 RCMP investigations. The Gillam RCMP have announced as a result of those 9 investigations, 4 men have been charged with sexual assault. The incidents are alleged to have occurred in the past 4 years. In some of the investigations, victims either didn't want to press charges or declined to cooperate with police. In an email, a Manitoba Hydro spokesman said individuals charged by RCMP have had their access to kiosk revoked. We do not tolerate illegal or exploitive behavior and have developed numerous initiatives to combat these issues. That was from Bruce Owen, Media Relations Officer at Manitoba Hydro. We will continue to follow up this story as it develops. After a 6-week break, Parliament resumed today, but in its temporary home in West Block, as Centre Block goes under a decade-long renovation. Algonquin leader Claudette Commanda smudged the new House of Commons this morning, but the ceremony caused a little bit of controversy. Bloc Québécois MP Louis Plamondon brought up on a point of order later on. He criticized the ceremony for being conducted mostly in English without a French translation. And speaking of translation, it was a historic day in the House as Liberal leader for Winnipeg Centre, Robert Falcon-Ouellette, gave a 9-minute speech in Cree on the Canadian liberation of the Dutch in World War II. And for the first time, it was simultaneously translated into English.
I cannot thank them enough for their hard work keeping our country safe.
It was also the first day for the new Minister of Indigenous Services in the House. Seamus O'Regan was asked a question by the NDP. It was about the housing crisis in Cat Lake First Nation in Northern Ontario, where leadership declared a state of emergency there over a week ago.
We're now 3 weeks into the state of emergency, the deplorable humanitarian crisis in Cat Lake, and temperatures have plunged to minus 55 degrees. We have hundreds of people huddled in squalid conditions. People are at risk. And yet the best the minister's been able to do after 3 weeks is to promise to send some bureaucrats to check on the situation. That's not going to cut it. What steps will this minister take to meet with the leadership, to put in place an emergency response team now, and to visit Cat Lake so he can see the deplorable conditions that the people of Cat Lake are living in? What will he do?
Indigenous services.
The safety of First Nations communities is of utmost importance. I have spoken with Chief Chipewyan, and I've affirmed our commitment to working with Cat Lake to address the community's housing needs. Officials will be meeting with the leadership there tomorrow to work on an action plan to help them work on the serious challenges that they confront. We will continue working in partnership with First Nations communities to advance their priorities and to support community-led solutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The case of Nunavut women missing in Ottawa has shifted gears from a missing persons investigation to a murder case, and the Ottawa police have made 2 arrests. 37-year-old Susan Kuplu-Urkitek went missing in Ottawa on January 10th. Police are now searching the Trail Road landfill facility in Ottawa where her remains are expected to be found. 2 people are now in custody, both charged with second-degree murder and improper interference with the body. The 2 charged are Kuplu-Urkitek's 18-year-old daughter and the daughter's 28-year-old boyfriend.
There's Lenise Kuplu, 18 years old, and there's also Dwight Brown, 28 years old, both in Ottawa, and we are continuing the investigation in the homicide with Susan.
An urban Aboriginal community group in Montreal has created an Indigenous Ally toolkit. So far, they've received over 100 orders for it from organizations based all over Turtle Island. Tom Venario has more.
When you first open this, you get like sort of a quick introduction as well as like boom right away. There's 3 different types of allies.
Leilani Shah is Ganyagahaga, or Mohawk, from Ganawage. She designed the recently launched Indigenous Ally Toolkit.
This toolkit is aimed at people who want to get into this work or who already are and want to become a better ally.
Created by the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network, the toolkit is broken down into 3 steps that non-Indigenous people can take to have a better relationship with Indigenous people. The first step focuses on best practices for folks who feel inclined to join Indigenous causes.
There's always been a lot of white saviors who, even though they have good intentions in their mind, have done some harm in trying to help Indigenous people. And I think a huge part of allyship is examining your privileges and the space you take up.
Brooke Deere says her life spent as a Ganyagahaga woman navigating predominantly white institutions has shown her there's a greater need for education. Step 2 of the toolkit provides a breakdown of proper terms, grammar, and common misconceptions.
I think this is all information that it's not new. People have been having these conversations for a long time, but to have all this information bundled nicely together, I think was something that was really needed.
Dakota Swift-Wolf helped research and write the content for the toolkit. The Ojibwe Cree woman says the toolkit aims to fill a gap in the public's knowledge of Indigenous issues.
Indigenous people deal with, I guess, being approached with these questions over and over again for their entire lives, and it definitely gets not knowing that there's a lot of emotional burdens that go into educating non-Indigenous people.
The toolkit is currently available in both English and French and can be downloaded online. And even though it's currently Montreal-centric, copies have been ordered by over 100 organizations across Canada and the U.S.
We want to work in the future with different territories, and we're talking about that. We really want to have this throughout Canada and have it territory specific.
As for the ultimate goal of the Indigenous Ally Toolkit, it's listed in the 3rd step. Have people absorb the knowledge within and then take action. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
It's time for a quick break, but we've got more news still to come, including the rebuilding of the embattled Thunder Bay Police Services Board. But here's the first of tomorrow's weather forecast.
To the east coast, we've got -7 and snow in St. John's, -3 and sunshine in Halifax. Maine is snow and -9. Cartwright's sunny and -8. -14 and snow in Chibougamau. Lots of snow in southern Quebec. -4 in Montreal. -6 for Peterborough and Toronto and snow. -15 in Sault Ste. Marie. -30 and snow in Big Trout Lake. Wawa is in at -22 with snow. Lots of sun in Manitoba. Puckatawaga is in at -31. -29 in Norway House. -30 in God's Lake. -28 for Barons River and Princess Harbour. -29s for Gimli and Winnipeg. -20 and sunshine in Swift Current. -26 and sunny in Estevan. -24 and sunny in North Battleford. -30 in Uranian City. -28 in La Ronge. -23 in Meadow Lake.
Welcome back. The Thunder Bay Police Service Board is trying to rebuild itself after 2 scathing reports found systemic racism within the ranks and administration. Georgianne Morisseau is the newest board member to be appointed by the city. She's the former chief of neighboring Fort William First Nation, and she joins us now from Thunder Bay. Georgianne, thanks for being on the show today. So you were elected chief of Fort William First Nation in 2013, and you were a councillor before that. Did your experience on council impact your decision to apply for a seat on the city's police board?
Yeah, I think that my experience, politically with the community of Fort William as a councillor and as the chief, I think has contributed to a lot of the decisions, making processes that I've utilized over the last few years. It's definitely given me a lot of on the ground in the trenches experiences that I would definitely not have had prior to. But I definitely, in making this decision to apply for the Police Services Board, I mean, there's a lot of variables and factors that go into that, but more importantly, it's being able to sit around a table and hopefully come up with some proactive ways to move things forward. And I think that combined with my experience previously, in the public field has lent to this decision.
You're the second First Nations person to secure a seat on the board. So 2 years ago, there was no Indigenous people on the board. How significant is it to have that representation now, and what's kind of your biggest priority going in?
I think it's great. I think it's moving closer to representing the community demographic that we live in here in Thunder Bay. I mean, we know that there is a significantly large and increasing Indigenous and First Nation population. So being able to see the representation and have representation in the decision-making process, sitting around a board as integral, as important, as in the public eye as this board, I think it is a positive step moving forward. I think it's something very important. I think it sends a message out there as well, in that we're looking to change the narrative, and that narrative is starting to change with these types of decisions happening, or these changes being made in terms of the representation around that table.
So you don't have any actual voting power right now. Board members have to take cultural awareness and governance training before getting that voting power back. Do you think the board administrator is on the right track with this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when it comes to, we have no voting powers now, but, ultimately, I think when it comes to training or any kind of capacity building, it's important that we learn, know, and understand exactly what we are faced with and exactly what it is that we're supposed to do. So the governance training will most definitely provide that. I think it's critical and important. I think it's something that, we need to and should do. Similarly with the cultural sensitivity training. I fully support this type of training. I think it's something that, you know, we can never have enough of, you know, when it comes to training, and definitely, again, going back to the demographics here in, you know, Thunder Bay and region, I think it's important that we have, you know, at least a preliminary understanding and start doing that, and then make it, you know, start making it more often, start doing things like this more often, implementing these types of training, so it doesn't just stop at the beginning, right, and that it continues through, and that we find ways to reinforce that type of training, not only, you know, and employ it through our decision making, you know, but also throughout, you know, the whole systemic process.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to give us some insight into what you're going to be up to. Of course, good luck. We'll be watching as this shakes down. You've got lots of work to do on the Police Services Board, and we wish you well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much for having me, and I'm going to take all the luck that you give me, and I'm going to put it in my pocket.
Saturday was Australia Day, but a lot of people there wanted to the name changed to Invasion Day. Here's more from our colleagues at National Indigenous Television.
Hello, Carla Grant with the latest NITV news. Thousands of people turned out at events across the country to mark January 26. In Melbourne and Adelaide, dawn services were held for the first time. In Sydney, the Woogalora Australia Day ceremony began official proceedings. Large numbers have joined Invasion Day marches, challenging the mainstream Australia Day narrative.
Yam, Steve Manganai Nipaluna, also known as Hobart, for the Invasion Day rally. Now, I can see over 500 people here at the moment. They're going to be marching from Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre down to Parliament House. But there's one thing that they do know for sure, and that's the chant. Australia Day is not okay. We won't celebrate Invasion Day.
Puts their blindfolds over their eyes as a symbolic gesture that no longer can this country turn a blind eye.
Baya, I'm Douglas Smith, and I'm standing here on the land of the Kaurna people. Today in Adelaide, the Survival Day events kicked off at Elder Park in the city with a traditional smoking ceremony that started at 7 a.m. About 200 Australians gathered on the banks of the River Torrens, where a minute silent was also held, paying respects to all Indigenous lives lost since colonisation.
I say to people, I know about you. Come and learn about me. Learn about who I am. Come and learn about this land that we call the mother.
The Australian of the Year honour has been shared this year by Dr Craig Challen and Dr Richard Harris for their role in the rescue of 12 boys from flooded caves in Thailand. And Arnhem Land rapper Danzel Baker, or Baker Boy, was named Young Australian of the Year. Stay tuned to NITV on air and online across the day for updates from around the country.
It's time for another quick break, but stick around. There's more news after the break, and here's the rest of tomorrow's weather.
Off to northern Alberta, we've got minus 15 and sunshine and high level, minus 19 and snow in Fort McMurray. Minus 4 for Calgary and sunshine, minus 11 and sunny in Medicine Hat. Plus 7 in Campbell River, plus 1 in Penticton, and 7 in Victoria. Minus 8 and snow in Dease Lake, minus 4 mix of sun and cloud in Prince George, minus 7 in Sandspit, minus 13 in Beaver Creek and Dawson City, minus 10 but some sunshine in Watson Lake. Fort Liards, minus 12, as is Trout Lake, sunshine there, minus 14 in snow in Norman Wells. New Vixen at minus 12 in snow, Colville Lake, minus 19 in snow. Cambridge Bay, clear and minus 36. Arviat in at minus 36 and mix of sun and cloud too. Arctic Bay is clear, minus 30, minus 26 in Iqaluit, minus 26 in Cape Dorset and sunshine.
Welcome back. A new play examining the lives of 3 unsung Canadian women is celebrating its world premiere in Winnipeg. Torn Through Time is the work of 3 female playwrights. Brittany Hobson caught up with one of the writers, Anishinaabe artist Frances Concan.
Set in a present-day classroom, Torn Through Time gives the audience a history lesson. The play centers around a young student named Jess. who learns about 3 little-known women in history after she summons them by ripping pages out of a book. One of those is Thana Delthur, a Dene peacemaker from the 1700s.
She could speak multiple languages, including English, so she was great at negotiating peace amongst the Dene, the Cree, and the fur traders.
Frances Concan co-wrote the play with Carrie Costello and Sharissa Richards. It took them 2 years to complete, and they are finally seeing it come to light on the Manitoba Theatre for Young People stage. Concan, who is Anishinaabe and Sylvanian, has been writing plays for 6 years. She says writing with others for the first time created a new challenge.
Much more collaborative, and you really had to not be selfish in your ideas and not be too stubborn, which I found really difficult. I'm a very stubborn person, I think, so it's a challenge to let go of things and let everyone's voice be equal and heard.
Along with Thana, Torn Through Time tells the stories of Helen Harrison, one of the first Canadian female pilots from the 1920s, and Rose Fortune, the first female police officer in North America. She was a cop in Nova Scotia in the 1780s. Concan hopes by sharing these women's stories, it will show heroes come in all shapes and sizes.
There are a lot more heroes in the world than we think. I think the ones we see on TV are just a small representation. And there's so many women and people of color that have done incredible things whose stories aren't getting told.
Torn Through Time runs until Sunday, February 3rd. Afterwards, the production will be traveling throughout Manitoba with stops in Wewisi-Kapo, Birdtail Sioux, and Peguis First Nations. The production is also looking at extending its reach beyond Manitoba to other cities in Canada. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A driver in Utah had some unusual car troubles after an owl got stuck in the grill of her vehicle. The woman hit the great horned owl while driving home. The bird wasn't seriously injured, but it did become trapped behind the grille of her SUV. The car owner called in a wildlife expert, and after a lot of effort, they were able to remove the owl safely. The bird is now at a rehab center where it's expected to spend a few weeks on the mend. That is your news for this Monday. You can always check out our website, aptnnews.ca, if you're looking for more Indigenous news. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.